Welcome to A Simple Life. Let's talk about next spring's garden right now in the fall. I've had some real successes and I've had some real failures, and I want to talk about my successes and my failures and also the ground that I am farming, gardening, growing food on so my family can eat good, healthy, natural food. Okay, behind me you can see there's a big black tarp, and this black tarp is used to choke out weeds. Well, I made a mistake. And I've made a few mistakes. I've made a lot of mistakes, but I specifically made a mistake that I'd made in the past. And the mistake was to assume that because I put down some type of barrier that everybody talks about, that I was not going to have a weed issue. So I want to talk about two different times I've done this and what I've learned and why I will never do it again. And while the methods do work, there's some magic sauce. And maybe I can share the magic sauce with you to make them really work for you. Okay, so this is my potato garden. We planted it back in I want to say May, and we've harvested all our potatoes off of it. But one of the issues I had in this potato garden was weeds, and a very specific weed. Let me see if I can show you. Oh yeah, it's still alive. The very specific weed I'm talking about is this, comfrey. Now, I know I use comfrey to make weed tea to feed my plants a very natural, nutritious diet of a liquid fertilizer. I do use it, and it is great stuff. But unfortunately, when you go through a garden that has it and you till, you've just gone from having 10 plants to 100 plants or 1,000 plants, depending on how many times you tilled. So let's put my tarp back so we can kill off the comfrey. The second thing is, we have a plethora of pigweed. This pigweed has been allowed to grow and seed and reseed this specific garden where I'm standing for probably 10 or 15 years. So getting rid of that is also something that we're going to fight a long battle to get rid of. But here's the mistake. The mistake I made was when we put our potato garden in, I put down cardboard, and I just assumed, like everybody talks about, you put down cardboard, put compost on top, you plant, everything's good. Well, it turns out that comfrey doesn't want to die, and it just shot straight up through that cardboard like it was nothing. Should I put more cardboard down? Sure. But what I really should have done is what I'm doing right here. I should have taken 2 to 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, and put my silage tarp down, let it choke and kill off all the weeds, then put my cardboard down, and then put my compost, and then planted, and I would have had a lot less weeds to deal with. Now, this isn't the only time I've done something like this, where I just assumed what people talked about was everything I needed to know. The other time I did this is we had a garden, and I used wood chips to choke out all the weeds. That doesn't work. It doesn't work if all you do is put down wood chips to choke the weeds. You need to do something like this, some type of suppression, something to suppress the weeds, so that way when they get started, you've already kind of knocked them back a little, and then the wood chips, it dooms them. They are just done. Okay, so failure and a success. The failure was I didn't tarp this. The success is tarps really, really work. And if you look behind me, this is what I'm talking about. Tarps really, really work. The same thing over here underneath this tarp. All the pigweed that we normally have in here has sprouted and died and sprouted and died over and over and over again, and it's gone. Now, is it permanently gone? No. There's a seed bank here. If I come in until I disturb this, I will have pigweed all over the place, all over again. But that's not the goal. The goal is to suppress it so then you can plant in it and you're ahead of the weeds enough, and potentially you can get so far ahead of them that when they pop up, well, guess what? You're done harvesting and you're moving on, putting another crop in, or you're putting a tarp down, or you're putting some mulch down, and you've knocked them back far enough that your plants aren't being choked out by them. Your plants are choking them out. Okay, so let's go over to my garden, and I want to show you the difference between what this looked like, which was weeds all over the place, and my garden. Because while I love comfrey, I really don't love comfrey when it's in my garden like this, and I really want it gone. and I do not want to have to deal with it and try to pick it in between my potatoes and my tomatoes or my carrots or anything else. So in the future, there will be potatoes here again, but what I don't want is to fight the comfrey when I come back. The good part is I've only had a tarp on this for about 4 days, and in those 4 or 5 days, you can see bugs are just starting to devour this and starting to break all of the comfrey and all the leafy matter down. That is something that is amazing, because if the bugs are eating this stuff, they're consuming it and they're manuring in here, because bugs do poo. It's just a minute amount compared to what we see out of cows and horses and other things like that. And that manure is really good for your garden. Okay, let's go over it and look at the greenhouse, because that is a totally different thing. All right, so the greenhouse is totally different than what we had over there. But I want to talk about my garden last year and how it changed from this year. See, last year, planted in the same place, but we didn't have plastic up. The other thing that we didn't do is we didn't use anything to suppress the weeds. We didn't use plastic or anything. We tilled it, planted our garden, and then we picked weeds all summer long. And it was a huge pain. It really was. Me and the boys really did not enjoy picking the weeds. So this year, we came in and we had plastic up. And I did this by accident and it worked. We had plastic up, so this didn't get any rain over winter at all. There was no rain. And then we came in, we'll say late winter, and we put in our compost, about 4 to 6 inches deep, and then we put wood chips in the walkways. And as you can see from my garden, we are not lacking in any type of nutrients. And to be honest, the garden is going insanely bonkers. Yes, that is 100 broccoli plants. Why do I have 100 broccoli plants? Well, I like broccoli. My whole family likes broccoli. And next year, hopefully my CSA will love broccoli, because I figured out some really cool varieties that grow in the heat, and you get a crop every 2 to 3 days. Yes, a crop every 2 to 3 days. Now, I'm not talking about big head. They're broccolini, smaller broccoli, but they are delicious. I mean, every night when I come home and I look at dinner and there's broccoli on the table, I'm in love. A little salt, a little pepper. Life is good. Okay, get back to what we were actually talking about, is weeds. Now, if you look in here, you're not going to see many weeds. The places that we have the most weeds are around my onions and around my cabbages, because those 2 beds have not been reset or replanted at all the whole year. They've just been here. We have a little bit of weeds around the Brussels sprouts, but because there's not a lot there, we kind of just get to those really easily. Now, what we did differently in here was we did not give the weeds the opportunity to germinate and get any sunlight when it was nice out for them to germinate and get sunlight. So we started working in here immediately, getting pressure on our walkways, getting ready to plant, prepping beds, and we were in here and we were active. And what really matters is they didn't get any sunlight and they didn't get the warmth they wanted until it was way too late for them. And by the time they actually got the warmth they wanted to germinate, well, the ground was way too hard for them to go that far. And the ones that did pop up, which were very few and far between, we immediately saw them and we pulled them. Now, we did have something happen, and that one thing I cannot control. But I did eventually deal with the problem, and the problem was moles and gophers. The biggest weeds in our garden come from moles and gophers. They are bringing the soil from underneath our compost to the top with all the weed seeds, and then they're getting nutrients that I'm providing for my plants, and then we end up with these weeds. Now, the good part is they're very easy to pick, and they're very small, and it's so late in the season that they are just behind. They're just flat out behind. Now for me, this is magical, because last summer we spent hours in the sun in the evening weeding the garden. And this year we've spent hours planting plants, harvesting plants, and eating what we grew in the garden. So what's the moral of this whole story? The moral of the story is, sometimes when people tell you, hey, you can just do this, they're not telling you all the work that went into it. The hours that we went into building these beds out properly, guess what? It was probably the same amount of time, if not more, than what we spent weeding last year. The difference is next year, we're not going to have to do this whole setup again. So the only thing we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to put about an inch, half inch of compost on top of all these beds, not the walkways. We're not going to put any wood chips there. And then we'll reset for spring. And that's it. There's not going to be any tilling. There's not going to be any breaking the ground up. We're done in here. Over the next couple years of doing this, we're going to have fewer and fewer weeds. Now, we did get weed seeds coming in from the sides. It happens. And there is something I'm going to do in the future in my greenhouses that help prevent some of that I didn't do this year because, well, this is an experiment. Everything I did in here this year was an experiment to see how I can grow on my land with my resources, the things that we produce, because our compost, that's all ours. It comes off our land. The wood chips, it's all stuff that is brought to me by Asplin, and they take it off the trees around our neighborhood, basically, and then I put it down. Once again, it's off the immediate area of where we're at. I do use potting soil that I buy in. Next year, I'm going to be trying a potting soil that is very local to us. It's about an hour away, and it's got some really interesting and cool ingredients, and then it's just, I'll go over that in the future. I'm super excited, and I make my own compost, so when I find somebody else's compost that makes me as excited about my compost, yeah, I'm a nerd. What can I say? Okay, so getting back to what we were talking about, these methods that people talk about, whether it's no-dig beds, wood chip beds, putting mulches down, whatever it is, how are those topics and those subjects and those methods kind of deceiving? Well, they're deceiving because nobody's telling you all the back end that's going into it. For example, you'll have folks tell you, we just put wood chips down every year. That's great and it's wonderful. And they're like, we don't have slug issues, whatever. That very well could be true. And I'm not disagreeing it. Back to Eden is somebody who does that kind of thing, and his gardens are amazing. A little bit different than a market garden, but amazing gardens. And his methodology works for him because of what he's doing and how many years he has done it. The first year, it's not going to work. And you have to keep up and keep up and keep up. If you don't keep doing it year after year, the method's not going to work for you. With no dig beds, you got to put a little bit of compost down every year. You got to feed those microbes. You got to feed all the organisms that need to be fed. And here's the real big secret that I don't think anybody really talks about. And as I've done research and dug into all this, if you don't have the life to support what you're putting on the ground, those methods will not work for you. Let me explain what I mean by life. You don't have the fungi, you don't have the microorganisms, you don't have all the little creatures that are going to break down that material that you're putting down. That material is just going to sit there. Now, eventually those creatures will arrive and they will be there, but it may take years for you to have a thriving ecosystem that actually can decompose and break down the matter that you're putting in your garden. I know this is getting nerdy, but let me show you what I'm talking about. So this is a bed I'm prepping to put stuff in. And you can see I haven't dug anywhere. We're going to dig right here. I'm going to dig the spade in. I'm going to give it a little pop. We're going to see what we find in here. Because almost every time I do this, I find worms. Lots and lots of little worms. Okay, so there you go. There's 1, 2, there's at least 2 in there. And that's just the first little spadeful. All right, let's try it again right here. I'm going to pop it in. See what we find. Ooh, there's one right there. Oh, you know what's funny? There's a worm, and there is the spine of a pig. Yes, there are animal bones in here. Oh, another worm. There's another worm. Let's see. Find anything else? Put that little piece of critter back. So, the point I'm trying to make is there is life here in my soil. If I take you over to the field that we're about to turn into gardens and showed you there, it'd be a totally different example. I could dig probably for 15 minutes and not find more than 1 or 2 worms. If I go in that area and I just put down a bunch of wood chips and I expect worms to appear magically and microorganisms to appear magically, they're not going to happen. I'm going to need to build up that ecosystem slowly. And that is what I've done in this greenhouse. I've slowly built up this ecosystem so that way As I put in more material and I put wood chips in my walkways, those wood chips break down. Matter of fact, let's take a look at the wood chips right here in front of us and see what they look like after literally, we'll call it 9 months of being in my garden. All right, here's our wood chips. I didn't go anywhere fancy, just right here. Let's see what we got here. Let's see what's underneath this ground. Because so far, I haven't done anything to these wood chips. I haven't flipped them over. Oh, that's what I wanted to see. See that? Those are our fungi, and look at that. I didn't even think I'd find one, but we found a worm. And this is just right here under my walkway. There's nothing here. There's no good soil here. There's no compost. There's nothing except for wood chips. Oh. Let's see if we can... And there's the clay underneath of it. That's the soil underneath that slowly is going to be absorbing all this organic matter. You know what's funny? I haven't watered this. This pathway hasn't been watered at all. Next to it's been watered. Everywhere around it's been watered. But the pathway has not been watered for probably 3-4 months. And right underneath there is a bunch of worms. One. There's two. Oh, there's 3. 4. There's at least 4 worms in that little area I dug up in my pathway, in wood chips, working, breaking down, doing what they need to do to make this whole entire environment perfect for growing food. So what I mean by needing the right environment to do some of these methods, the soil, the ground needs to be alive. If there's nothing there and you put wood chips down, your garden is not going to grow. If there is nothing there and you come in and you mulch like crazy and put hay down everywhere, nothing's probably going to grow all that great. You're going to have to start with something that's alive. So we love our compost because we know it comes off our land. It's at the top of the property. I bake it off all summer, and then I start spreading it out as we get into fall, and then I cover it over winter so it doesn't get too saturated. So either in very early spring or very early winter, I come in and I put my compost down. That's what we did last year, and it worked great. It's winter, I'm going to cover it so that way as we go through winter, we get a lot of rain here, like 40 inches. We make sure that that's not all getting washed down the hillside. Now, where I'm planting isn't too steep. I'm not really worried about that. What I am trying to do is make sure my compost has time to kind of sit there for about 2 to 3 weeks and kind of acclimate itself with the ground. I know this sounds all hippy-dippy. Listen, I didn't believe it until I did it. And as I've had better and better results in my garden, as you guys have seen, I'm realizing that there is something to making sure the soil is alive. And there's something to these methods that some of these old gardeners talk about. Unfortunately, the missing ingredient is we, in many cases, are trying to make McDonald's gardens. What do I mean by a McDonald's garden? Well, we want it right now in 90 seconds. We need our garden done, planted, no weeds, and lots of good food. And that is not how gardening works. I've learned that. I've seen that, and I am very aware of it now. We spent a lot of time to get this garden to grow like this. This was not a short amount of work. This was a lot of hard work. And as we go around the property and I make beds in multiple places, there are things that I'm starting to consider when I make those beds. Let's go talk about the next place that I'm going to start working. So this is the area. You guys have seen this area because last year we cleaned this out during the winter. So I'm going to be coming in here very soon and I'm going to start prepping this. And what I mean by prepping is I'm going to come in with a disc and I'm going to disc this and I'm going to smooth it off and I'm going to basically level the soil. The reason for leveling this area is I realized all those bumps, all those divots, they really add up to a lot of extra raking. I come in here with a disc and a harrow and I smooth this whole area out and I make it generally as smooth as I can get it. It's going to make it much easier when we come in and we start putting beds in to not have to fill in those divots. That is something I dealt with where my potato garden was. I figured, hey, we're going to be putting down stuff. The little divots won't matter. It's all good. Well, what I ended up having was inconsistency in the depth of my compost. Some areas had 6 inches and some areas had 3 inches. Well, that's a big difference when you're planting potatoes. The ones that were 6 inches deep did amazing. The ones that were 3 inches deep, not so much. So in this garden, in this area, we're going to come in. The only thing we really need to do is we need to disc it, level it, and then we'll put a cover crop in. I'll probably put in rye for overwinter. Now this is one area. The next area is going to take quite a bit more work. Let me show you. All right, this is the next area. We have the greenhouse here, and I have these grapes here. This is the next area I'm going to be resetting and turning into gardens. And there's actually going to be some greenhouses right here. Why am I taking out the grapes? Well, there's a lot of issues with this area. One of the issues is it's really overgrown with blackberry, and it's going to be really hard to really adjust this area and make this area work for grapes. It's also very close to my greenhouse, my pond's right here. All those things add up to, I would like to have the 3 greenhouses right in a row right here. And so these grapes are going to be removed. And the other issue with these grapes is they are seeded and they're a table grape, which is wonderful, but let me explain. Table grapes make you $1 a pound. That's all you get for table grapes when it comes to selling them. $1 a pound is not much when in the same area you can raise a whole entire garden that makes a lot more than $1 a pound. And so I'm looking at this as a monetary thing, just how it is. So over this next fall and winter, we are going to start removing these, leveling the ground, prepping it, and then getting some cover crops and stuff like that going in here. Whether or not we put up the greenhouses first, I'm not sure. We may put the greenhouses up, but not put plastic on or fencing and just work the ground, let the cover crop exist here and let that feed the ground and do that for a year. I'm not sure. I never know. Sometimes life sneaks up on you and you do things faster than you expect. So I'm not going to promise anything. But this is the next area. And this area is obviously going to have a whole nother variety of issues different from the area over there. This is going to have similar issues to the area that we are about to put our beds in for next spring. So Monday, we will form the beds over in the other area. Larry's coming. We got canceled or rained out a couple times, which is always unfortunate. This area is going to be very similar to that area. There's going to be a lot of work that has to go into getting all the metal stakes and all the root systems and all that stuff out. But we'll be using the tarp system that we used over there, over here, to help kill off any of the grapes or blackberries that persist, or poison oak, because there's a whole lot of poison oak right there. And that's going to help us control this area. All right. I know I've kind of got off topic. I wanted to share my thoughts about how and why I do the beds the way I do them and what I've learned over the last, I'm going to say 5 years. Because before I did my own garden, I was helping my wife do hers. Now, while I didn't grow anything in there, she did all the growing. I did a lot of the tilling and a lot of the working, and I actually went in and did some of the weeding. And so I was pretty aware of the difficulties. And now I'm seeing what I'm doing and seeing how easy it's coming, and seeing I spend more of my time harvesting the amazing harvest I have in there than time spent dealing with the weeds and all that kind of stuff. So figured I'd share with you, and thank you so much for joining us on A Simple Life. Hopefully we'll see you soon. Have a good one. God bless. Bye.